I call to order the Planning Commission meeting of November 22, and we'll proceed with roll call.
Mr. Homan? Mr. Coots?
Here.
Ms. Lazaris?
Here.
Mr. Grady?
Here.
Mrs. Bishop?
Here.
Mr. Foster?
Here.
Dr. Mason?
Here.
Thank you.
All right, thank you. The next item of business is number 3, correction and or approval of the meeting minutes of October 25, 2022 and November 10, 2022. And you can offer a motion for them individually or together if you wish.
I think we need to do them individually. I was here for only one of them.
Okay, I'll motion to approve the minutes for 10:25.
Second.
All right. They moved and seconded to approve the minutes of October 25th. All those will hold that thought. Let's proceed with roll call vote on that.
Can I just confirm that was Mr. Grady and Mrs. Bishop?
Yes.
Thank you. Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Aye.
Dr. Mason?
Aye.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Motion passed 6-0.
All right. And next we have the minutes of November 10th.
Move to approve 11:10 meeting notes.
Second.
Then moved by Mr. Grady and seconded by Mrs. Bishop to approve the minutes of November 10th. Then we'll proceed with a roll call vote on that.
Mr. Grady?
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop?
Aye.
Mr. Foster?
Abstain.
Dr. Mason?
Aye.
Mr. Coots?
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris?
Aye.
Motion passes 5-0.
All right. And next we have item number 4. The public may address the commission at this time regarding items on the agenda unless the item is the subject of a public hearing. If your comments pertain to a public hearing, please hold your comments until the hearing. We do have 2 public hearings this evening. Item number 6, Conditional Use Request by Pam and Hank Geib for grading, filling, and excavation within 300 feet of the shoreline and for alternative vegetative restoration at 400 Lake Park Place. And item number 8, Conditional Use Request by Jim Triatik on behalf of owner Paul Schlagenhauf for amending a conditional use permit at Badger Chevrolet Buick 321 East Tyranena Park Road. Public comment may also be made at this time on items that are not on the agenda if you have registered with the city clerk before the meeting. The state's open meeting law discourages action by the commission on items not listed on the agenda. Please keep comments limited to 3 minutes. State name and address when starting your comments. Also fill out the sign-in sheet at the podium. For people online, please follow the Zoom link or the phone number listed on the Plan Commission agenda. All right, I understand that we have Mr. Temperley who has registered to speak. Mr. Temperley, would you like to speak?
Yes, I'm on the Public Works Board. We seem to have overlapping duties to make recommendations on bike plans and sidewalk plans. And in fact, in June of this year, we talked about the Planning Commission's comprehensive bike plan from 2006, which we were not aware of. And we've never made any budget recommendations to implement any of that bike plan at all. So pretty much whatever the Planning Commission voted on in 2006 was for naught. And it seems like history is repeating itself again because you have a bike plan and a pedestrian plan on your agenda. And if the Public Works Board is not on board for the next 10 years, we're not going to make any budget recommendations to implement any part of your plan because we know nothing about it. So if you're comfortable of using your personal time discussing a plan that's just not going to be carried out through the budget process because the Public Works Board is not going to make any recommendations, I guess, if you're fine with that, but feel free to keep discussing plans that just won't be voted on through the budget process to the Public Works Board. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Temperley. Is there anyone else who wishes to speak under the general public comment? All right. All right, there being none, then we do proceed with item number 5, which is discussion recommendation on request for zoning amendment from Ryan Malone, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, to change the zoning from planned business PV to planned business with planned development district overlay PDD-Overlay for a property located at West 7411 County Highway V, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel number 246071312140002, currently tabled. And to start, I'd like to call on the consulting planners and staff to bring us up to date on the request to amend this conditional use permit.
It's still under review by the county. We're still waiting for county review on it, so it can remain tabled at this time.
All right. All right, so it's still under review by the County Highway Department? All right, very good.
That's correct.
All right. Well, in that case, I'll entertain a motion to table this.
Was it ever taken off the table? I don't think you have to address it at all.
So we don't have to do
It
that?
remains tabled.
Okay. All right, in that case, this remains tabled until we have further information. All right. Well, we go on to item number 6, which is public hearing, conditional use request from Pam and Hank Geib in the single-family residential district on 16 with Lakeshore Residential Overlay for grading, filling, and excavation within 300 feet of the shoreline to remove existing Timberlake access stairs and retaining wall, and for an alternative vegetative cutting plan for landscape restoration at 400 Lake Park Place, parcel number 246071314410009. Before we have public testimony, then I'll call on our consulting planners to present the request.
Thank you. So, much like items that have been on the agenda for the past several months, this is a request for a conditional use permit for grading and excavation, and then the alternative vegetative cutting plan. In this particular instance, there's existing boathouse access stairs that are existing, and they're looking to repair those. There's some non-conforming issues there that I'll speak to in a moment, but ultimately the request is to try to make sure that this is more accessible and safe as far as access to the boathouse. So the existing stairways and the boathouse do need to be within the vision and access corridor. The permitted area is 24 feet based on their frontage on the lake. Or rather, the permitted area is 18 feet, but the allowed space is, or the existing condition is 24 feet. What they're proposing will remain within that 24 feet. That is the legal non-conforming dimension, as long as that is maintained, that is permitted by the ordinance. As far as the grading and excavation, a narrative was provided by the petitioner that describes the erosion control and preservation on the shoreline during construction. There are certain sections of the code 660.35D that outline specific recommendations, and those are found with the recommendation from staff. The alternative vegetative cutting plan does have other specific requirements, as you may recall. One being that the proposed plan does not propose anything that creates undue erosion on the shoreline. Staff believes that that condition is met here. And then the proposed plan does provide substantial shielding from the water to any structures, stairways, et cetera, upslope from the improvements. In this case, the areas that are being impacted as far as the vegetation are on a lower portion of the site, a lower terrace, and in this case, the visibility from the water is not impacted. So ultimately, staff does recommend approving this with the conditions outlined in the memo. First being the conditions outlined in section 660.35D, and then any additional technical requirements or requirements listed from Public Works or the city's engineer.
All right. All right, thank you, Mr. Carranza. All right. The public hearing is open. Would anyone like to speak to this conditional use request? All right. Now please approach the podium and state your name and address.
Hello, my name is David Lindloff. I live at 520 West Lake Park Place, and I'm here representing the Cedars. We share our northern property boundary with the Geibs. In referring to this drawing in particular, can we scroll back to the right of the picture? The square area, they're almost in the center there, where they say that that's where they're going to be bringing in equipment. That's not their property, that's ours. And to this point, nobody has coordinated with us for access to our property. Also, the artist here, while there's really no dimensional aspect to it, there's no showing any kind of dimensions at all. That landstone sidewalk there actually goes over the property line. We had it surveyed in 2017, and we informed them that they were encroaching on our property, and it still has not been fixed. So we would not agree with this at this point.
All right. Do you have anything else to add, Mr. Lindlaw?
I don't have anything else at this point, no. I do have a copy of the plat survey that was done that shows that. I have it on a laptop. I wasn't able to print it out before I got here tonight.
All right.
So if anybody'd like to see that, they can just let me know.
All right. All right, thank you. All right, the public hearing is still open. Would anyone else like to speak?
Carol Burrows, 169 West Lake Park Place. For those of you who are not familiar with the Cedars, there is a wide open space. Cedars was deeded to the 29 homes that are on West Lake Park Place and a couple of other places. A couple of them are on South Main Street. It was deeded by Bob Ferry back in 1978. And so there is a whole long space there. One of the things that I think has happened here is if you have a backdoor neighbor and you are doing some planting, you are very aware of where your lot line is and you are careful not to infringe on somebody else's property. Right now, there's a lot of open space there. It's like a park. It is deeded to be taken care of in park-like setting. And so we are stewards of that lake area. And so we've had, as you all know, about the south side, and that has been, well, we just don't want anything like that to happen on the north side. And I think what has happened is that, it's difficult sometimes to see if you're looking into a woods or an open area. But right now, To leave it as this is here would mean the plantings to be restored on the south side of their property line would be on our area, on our Cedars property. I do have a copy of the plat survey. I was able to make a copy last night, so I do have a copy of that if you'd like it.
Yes, it'd be fine. We'll just ask for you to supply that to Mr. Daly over here. All right, thank you, Mrs. Burrows.
Hello, I'm Brandy Broskowski-Duro, and I live at 204 West Lake Park Place in Lake Mills. Also a member of the Cedars. I will preface my comments to say, we love Geibs. We love them very much as neighbors. And it seems it's just something that needs to be worked out where the actual boundaries are. We know from the surveys where they are. And I'm very much in favor of what they want to do on their property, but not with it crossing the property boundary mark. And I'm hoping that the Plan Commission will take that into consideration before granting final approval, that you would make sure that what is being granted is not providing one neighbor's property and giving it to an adjoining neighbor to avoid problems just from that standpoint. But again, I think that their plans for what they're doing seems like a nice plan, but just as long as it's within their property boundaries. Thank you.
All right, thank you, Mrs. Duro. The public hearing is still open. Would anyone else like to speak to this request?
Sorry, Pam. Okay.
Hi, I'm Pam Geib, 400 Lake Park Place. And I understand that what we are asking is to go over our neighbor's property. We understand that. And we haven't approached them on it because we didn't know if we were going to get the conditional use permit or not. And we would certainly talk to our neighbors about asking them and crossing their property in order to get the work done. And then certainly putting the property back the way that it was or to however they would like it afterwards. I would think that this would be something that they would consider since multiple times work has been done in the Cedars and they have crossed over our driveway several times to have that work accomplished, and without asking us or notifying us that that was going to happen. And we've always allowed that for the most part. So we do not need that, however, to do this project. We can bring the equipment down our sidewalk and access the property that way. So, I don't think that that should stop the conditional use permit at this point, because we can access it other ways if they don't agree to that.
All right. All right, thank you, Mrs. Geib.
Hi, my name is Morgan Geib. I live at N6481 Shorewood Hills Road. And I'm just here to chat a little bit. One of the things I think I want to talk to the committee about is the representation here is Cedars is a 501c3. So they operate within a tax exemption zone. And oftentimes they represent themselves as a unified group, when sometimes people within the group actually don't support the message here. So I think it's a distinction that should probably be made by the individuals as opposed to coming forward as a whole 29 household group. That's maybe not necessarily the whole story on that side. So thank you. Oh, one other comment. This is primarily an erosion control conversation. I do quite a bit of trail building for the county, and erosion control is our primary objective when we're out there building trails. 3% grade is minimum to get the water to run. 8% is too aggressive to really be trying to hack at. Anything above 10% is a pretty good pitch. And everything that the report I read said that this is all over 20% unless we come at it from this angle. So thank you. Appreciate the time.
All right, thank you, sir. All right, we are still in public hearing. Would anyone else like to comment on this request? The public hearing is still open. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment? Are there any further comments regarding this request? All right, in that case, we close the public hearing and we go on to item number 7, discussion recommendation on conditional use request from Pam and Hank Geib in the single-family residential district with residential overlay at Lakeshore Residential Overlay for grading, filling, and excavation within 300 feet of the shoreline to remove existing timber lake access stairs and retaining wall, and for alternative vegetative cutting plan to improve the landscape at 400 Lake Park Place. We do have a prepared motion now. We have had testimony concerning the encroachment of some of the plans for the landscaping going beyond the property line of the Geibs. So the document that Mr. Daly that you have, is that shedding light on this matter?
I would need more time to take a look at it to determine if there is an encroachment or not. I'm not able to just to tell right now. It's up. We have the plat of survey on the screen for you there. But as comparing it to the plans that were submitted by the petitioner with receiving this just now, I wouldn't be able to speak on it in an informed manner.
Yeah, I understand. Okay. Well, Mr. Wolf and Mr. Carranza, do you have a recommendation for what to do, or do you recommend tabling this matter?
Well, I think as Mr. Carranza kind of pointed out, it does really meet all the requirements. Now, we certainly aren't advocating that one property owner start impacting another's. As the petitioner had indicated, that they could revise their plan to remove, and I would suggest that that happen before it go to the council for its approval. Should it be approved by this, or recommended by this body? And perhaps in the meantime, the property owners can talk with one another and maybe it will result in a better plan. But I would say at a minimum, a condition of approval would be revising the submitted plans to illustrate not using the neighboring property for access or any grading, et cetera, or disturbance on what is the Cedars property. But I don't see a reason that it couldn't continue to move forward. Showing what's their property. I'm not aware of there being a lot line dispute related to this. So if our plans indicate that they're staying wholly on their property to make their improvements, I can't see why there would be an issue.
All right. Well, in that case, we do have a prepared motion, and that might be a condition that we can add to the prepared motion should the Plan Commission wish to proceed with a recommendation regarding this motion. The Plan Commission motion 22-11-1, that's Henry T. Geib II and Pamela M. McCormick Geib, 400 West Lake Park Place, Lake Mills, Wisconsin, parcel number 246071314410009. Conditional use permit for grading, filling, and excavation on a slope greater than 20% within 300 feet of the ordinary high water mark of Rock Lake for the purpose of redevelopment of retaining walls and stairs within the vision and access corridor, and conditional use permit for alternative vegetative cutting plan. This motion does set forth the city's zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes, the city's regulations on shoreline preservation and vision and access corridor, the conditional use request by the Geibs, review by city staff and consultants, tonight's public hearing and Plan Commission review. This motion does provide for Plan Commission recommendation to the City Council to grant the requested conditional use permits subject to applicable state law, administrative code, and local ordinances. This motion further makes Plan Commission findings that concur with the planner's findings and the recommendations set forth in the planner's memo. I would entertain, however, with the issues that have been brought up by neighbors in the Cedars, an amendment or adding to the conditions that work be contained within the property the Geibs own, and further to that, I don't think we really have to say anything about access. That's up to the Geibs to negotiate that if they wish to if they want to be able to cross other people's property to get equipment in. That's not our concern. But we could add, I would recommend that someone maybe want to amend this to add a requirement that all the work be contained within their property boundaries, and I think that would be sufficient. And that their plan, and that they revise the plan accordingly.
Okay, I will make that motion to approve, if I can find the motion here, motion 22-11-1, amended to include all changes must be verified on individuals' property with lot line verification. I don't know. How do you want to, how do we want to state this?
Since no one asked, I'm going to interject. This is Attorney Drescher.
Yep.
We aren't aware of a lot line dispute. The city is not in the business of inserting itself in civil issues like this. If there's any concern with the drawing itself and with an encroachment, I would say that is between the individual entity and the owner of the property, the petitioner, to resolve. Yes, certainly. A condition of this conditional use permit is to abide by the law that limits the ability to trespass, that limits the ability to create such an encroachment if it exists. I don't know how much you want to add to this resolution with wishy-washy language. If you're going to be direct and state that all improvements must be within the petitioner's property, I think that's appropriate. Establishing anything with regard to the boundaries themselves, which, you know, we don't know. There may be an adverse possession claim. There may be other remedies that we're not aware of. So I wouldn't want the city to comment on that, or this board to comment on that at this point.
Nope, makes sense. And since the first condition does say comply with applicable state law, that covers,
That should cover
that
it.
covers that piece of it. So then, I guess the case is, do we really want to have that extra piece in there to say, stay within your?
I would think that we would, simply because the plans that were submitted does have that square that's very clearly over the line, talking about pulling out plants and then putting them back when they're done, when that part should not be happening, because that's clearly going over the line.
Yeah, but that's also not part of the conditional use.
I interpreted that as more of an access issue.
Right.
If you're going to amend this to state that all improvements must be contained within the petitioner's property, that's appropriate.
Okay,
Aye.
we'll make that statement.
Aye. All right, it's been moved to add the condition that all improvements be contained within the petitioner's property is by Mr. Foster. Is there a second?
Mr. Coots will second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Coots to add the condition that all improvements be contained within the petitioner's property. Then, other further discussion? All right, in that case, we proceed with a roll call vote on the amendment.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Dr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Mrs. Zaris,
Aye.
Mr. Grady.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, the motion 2211 is now amended by adding that, that condition. Is there a motion concerning the amended motion 2211-1?
I move to approve motion. Hold on, I don't have the right number. Is it 22-11-1? Thank you, Mr. Foster.
Yeah.
As amended.
Second.
All right, it's been moved by Mrs. Bishop and seconded by Dr. Mason to approve Plan Commission Motion 2211-1 as amended. Any further discussion? All right, in that case, we'll proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Dr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Mrs. Zaris,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right, thank you. Next, we have item number 8, public hearing, conditional use request from applicant Jim Triatik, architect builder, on behalf of owner Paul Schlagenhauf for site plan amendments for motor vehicle service and repair at 321 E Tyranena Rd, identified by parcel number 246071312130002. Before we open to public comment, then we'll ask the consulting planners to present the a request for amendment to this conditional use.
Thank you, Ms. Lazares. The memo, I'll just kind of run through it very quickly. It's available online. Badger Chevrolet came to us in late 2021 to make additions to their building and improvements to their site. Of those improvements, it included not just the building addition, but new pavement, landscaping. There were building lighting proposed at that time. In conducting an inspection of the site, as we do as part of their final occupancy, it was noted that there were some deviations from the approved plan. Some things that were just constructed, some changes that were made, which certainly there is a process by which those changes can happen with something that has a conditional use. Changes in the field can't always kind of happen in that manner. So this is the prescribed process to petitioning for those changes. Notably, there were some changes made to landscaping on the site, some landscape islands, and then some new lighting and relocated lighting was installed on the eastern part of the site that was impacted by the nice addition that they had done to the building. So really, that's what we're here focused on tonight, is those kind of changes. I'll just highlight them very quickly. Screen, you can see a detail from the landscaping plan that was approved. There was some parking located kind of along Tyranena at the south end of the site that had some landscaping islands. They want to kind of amend this to remove that landscaping and instead install and have and kind of expanded island, end cap island in that area. The other is I'll say inadvertent omission of a landscape island on the north side of the building, on the north side of the addition. And so we're requesting that that be put back in. There's some latitude on where that would be that's best for the site. Petitioners can certainly indicate that with revised plans. It can be based upon what's been shown on their existing site and landscape plan, or could be moved accordingly. We would just need plans to indicate that. Then the other issue is some relocated lighting and new lighting. So on the site, I'm just going to show you the plan. Lighting was, as I said, impacted by the addition. They looked to move that back to the east side of the site. You can see where it says future parking. A decision was made that was approved as a part of the city's approval. That future became immediate, which is certainly not an issue. And then they wanted to add lighting for obvious reasons. It's dark here at 4 o'clock, so and just for overnight security, of course. So you can see that there's some yellow and red circles there showing where new bollard or bases were poured and lights were installed. Show a photo that just kind of indicates, you can see where some light fixture bases were re-poured. 3 of those fixtures are located, are located in a grassed area off the pavement. Those are the ones that are generally the 3 on the south. And then there's the one that's kind of in the pavement area. As you know, the zoning code requires those types of fixtures to be in a landscape island or landscaped area. And that hasn't been done, but it's certainly a remedy that could be explored. And then the others are located off of the pavement in an area. But our issue now that we're grappling with is the fact that those bases were poured at 3 feet. Our code requires a maximum of 1 foot. Again, them being outside of paved areas is to ensure that they are protected. That you'd generally run out of pavement or hit a curb before you would bump into a base or a lighting fixture of some type. We need to explore, as you can see, here's the ones that are on the edge of the pond, some remedies to this. This does happen periodically. It happened most recently with the Topol development, the new development down on South Main Street. They poured a series of them that were not in compliance with their plan. This one's a little different in that kind of while they were under construction, they chose to move some of these or pour some of these fixtures. They weren't a part of the original approval. They just weren't indicated. And so I guess the options available to the city on this is to, one, not allow it. We are waiting for some photometric plans. I'm told that they were bringing those tonight to be evaluated. We just require photometrics to make sure lighting levels comply with our code requirements. So the options here are to not permit them to have the new lighting, to permit it as it exists, or to require them to remove or to lower the bases. These aren't immediately adjacent to the roadway. They aren't immediately adjacent to the sidewalk, which has been a challenge in other areas. Certainly the site looks very nice. There certainly is an expense associated with telling them to remove a 3 foot wide, probably 6 or so foot deep base. There is certainly an opportunity to landscape these to improve the aesthetic around them for visibility. That hasn't been the case in some other ones where there wasn't ample area to provide landscaping that would survive or shield the fixtures. But those are the issues we're grappling with tonight. The city staff is certainly not saying that the lighting shouldn't be approved, but a decision does need to be made about the base height and any potential screening associated with that. And then the need to ensure that photometrics comply with our requirements. With that, I'm sure the petitioners would like to address the commission.
All right, yes, indeed, we're still in public hearing. Would anyone, any of you like to make a public comment? And if so, then sign in with your, and state your name and address for the record.
My name is Jim Triatik. I'm the applicant, 1314 Emil Street in Madison. I'm here tonight with Neil Roofing and Tony Treader of Badger. They could answer any questions they have for you. Start with the easy one, the landscaping one on the north side at the very top there. When we originally presented this plan, this is a drawing. I don't know why I still have it, but I kept it for a year that we presented, and we didn't have those originally in there. We agreed to do it. You can see there's a revision on there. The one on the north is not an issue. We just had our paving company just simply went and paved right over. It was easier to just pave the whole parking lot, cut them out later. We're going to cut them out, but we then decided to ask if we could move these other two, as was shown, the other two there. Once we realized they were really in a bad spot for the bigger trucks to get in. So we were proposing that instead of the two islands right here, we put one here. It's actually a little bit bigger. And I just simply took the plants that were in there, the 12, there was like 6, and I just moved them over. So we have the same number of landscape points, and we would still hope we can do that, asking to do that tonight. It'll probably happen in the fall now with the landscaping. That way we can just snowplow over it this winter, but we'd like to do that, and we will take care of the one on the north. So that's my one issue. And then the site lighting, if we go to the one with the, the red dots. Let's start with the red dots. Those were existing, and when we regraded the parking lot for that retention area and get the site to drain properly, we actually made it worse. Now they were sticking up even higher. We graded a lot lower, and now you would have really hated them. So we decided we're going to pour them back in. And it's the same issue with the ones in yellow. We looked at the existing ones that were built in '98. We just, that's the truth. We just matched the existing. And that's typically what I see. And now I notice your code, it looks, your light fixtures like around the park, they look really nice, lower. I understand that. We just didn't see that. We didn't know it. We just replaced what was there. And part of it is, just to keep the wires, just keep them out of the snow. But, I honestly didn't know because we hadn't looked into that. So we just were matching what was there. The future parking is something I had, we had talked about, I had shown again on this drawing. So that was always planned. A year ago, we were just getting out of COVID. We didn't have much inventory. Now it's full of inventory. Things are getting a lot better. So those are really our two issues tonight. To lower those bases that would be tough. We'd have to, any of them, we'd have to dig them all out, tear them all out. I did forget to mention that the two yellow dots were light fixtures that, because of our addition over here, there were two light poles here. We took them out and just simply relocated them. The exact same poles that were there. We put up in '98 for the two yellow dots. So that's how it happened. So any questions for me or the guys from Badger?
I guess not at this time, but perhaps during discussion. All right, thank you, Mr. Triatik.
Okay.
All right, we are still in public hearing. Would anyone else like to comment?
Okay.
Hi, I'm Tony Treader. I'm the general manager for Badger Chevy for a short period of time. We're very willing to build. We wanted to make it look at as well as we can also. Obviously, we've done a lot to do that. We've put a lot of vegetation around everything, and some of it will never be seen, unfortunately, from the highway because of the 6 foot of grass that we have on the other side of the fence. But we're very willing to build and put green space around those three green shrubs on these three here, so you can't be seen from the roads. The other red one is actually, like I said, we just reset it, actually lowered it a little bit from where it was to make it more stable. I know we've had some discussions on what we can do to try to protect it also. Can be done. We're trying to make it look as nice as we can. But we will, in the springtime, not fall, in the springtime, put some more green around that space as things can start growing again. Hopefully that comes sometime. I say fall. You said fall. Okay, that's it.
Hi, thank you.
I did forget one thing. I did have a photometric plan for those two ones in yellow. I just wasn't able to get the whole property. It was requested to do the whole site, but I got the two ones in yellow, and I think I included that. I mean, it's gonna be hard for you folks to see, but you know, the light levels, the computer, they just drop off. They're all easily within Badger's property, where these little numbers drop off. There's nothing even close to the property line. And the average is, average foot candle is 1.93. The maximum is 8, right under the lights, as you would expect. But again, it's because the lights are really centered in the property, it didn't see an issue, or at least I haven't in my past experience see an issue with a light level like that not being onto the other people's properties. So if maybe I'd see this, I could pass it around.
All right. I think if it's available to the staff, are they supplied with what you have there?
Yeah, I had this one, but they requested the whole site, and I couldn't get I might have to get someone else to do it. I couldn't get our electrician to provide that. He was struggling with the older existing fixtures, and we couldn't find, all I found was a fixture cut from 98. I don't think they were doing photometric plans back then, but I didn't have it, so I thought I sent this in.
All right.
Yep, we have that, I'm sorry.
Yeah,
It's online for everyone to view.
Yeah, this is the same plan. I just colored it up. You can see the numbers just drop away. You know, in the very perimeter, those numbers are 0.1. You know, they're at a certain point, they just don't calculate anymore. You can see where the light level ends. That's all I have. I was hoping to get more before the meeting, but again, it's the two relocated lights. The existing ones I don't have.
All right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Triatik. Are there any, we're still in public hearing. Is there anyone else who wishes to comment on this? Are there further public comments on this request? Would anyone else like to comment at this time? All right, in that case, I close the public hearing and we move on to item number 9, discussion recommendation on conditional use request from applicant Jim Triatik, architect builder, on behalf of owner Paul Schlagenhauf for site plan amendments for motor vehicle service and repair at 321 E Tyranena Rd, identified by parcel number 24607131213 with 002. Mr. Wolf and Mr. Carranza, do you or will you have everything that is going to be needed to proceed with completing the site plan requirements for this amendment?
We will need the revised or updated photometric plan that shows all the lighting. Obviously, you can understand that they added wall pack lighting on the west end. We have photometrics from the original approvals associated with that.
Yeah.
Then relocating the lights, it's really to confirm, again, where you have light overlap, that we aren't getting hot spots and that we are complying with the code to make sure there isn't light trespass. Right, you have one light, it's one thing, you have multiple lights next to each other, it changes photometrics. It should be I'll say kind of a standard thing that they should be able to get from their lighting contractor. The fixture heads themselves, the lamps, are newer, so there should be some level of detail on those. While the poles, most of the poles are older, those are updated LED lights out there. So I would like to think that there should be some level of photometrics. So we would need that to be a part of the approval. It's to confirm code compliance. The last issue is really a decision from the Plan Commission and recommendation to the council on how to handle the newly poured bases. Because again, the hard line, as we've put in the recommendation, is that technically they should be cut down or replaced with ones that comply. Plan Commission certainly can make a recommendation otherwise, but I want to make sure that it's clear that what came out of the code is the 6-inch.
Yes, right.
I would just indicate, we did meet with them on site and thought, obviously understanding the expense involved with the strict compliance that would be outlined as far as removing them and reinstalling them. And, trying to meet the intent of the code, which is screening, not having these substantial bases visible from, from outside of the property. That's when Dustin and I had discussed with them some substantial screening around the ones that are in the grassed area already to shield them from the public view. They are set back farther from the right of way, from the roadway than this body has seen in the past. And then also discussed installing a landscaped island around the one that's in the middle of the that is in the paved area of the parking lot, and shielding that enough green space that it could sustain landscaping as well, to shield that base from view as well. And so that is a compromise of sorts that we had discussed with them, that may be short of the strict interpretation of the zoning code, which would require them to be removed and re-poured. Perhaps that would meet the intent of the code, but ultimately it's up to the Plan Commission as to what level of compliance and or interpretation and application of that code.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Daly. In the prepared motion, one of the conditions that appear in this prepared motion and does call for an exterior lighting and photometric plan provided that identifies existing, removed, and proposed parking lot land lighting, so on and so forth, but that this plan would include removed pole bases installed with visibility from Tyranena Park Road right away. So this prepared motion is calling for the removal and reinstallation.
Yeah, looking the motion over, I would be willing to support it with the removal of 3A1I and 3A1II. Removing the pole bases and reinstalling shorter pole bases. I think those could be taken out, and then the motion would be sufficient.
All right. So are you making a motion to amend it to remove one I and one II from here?
I would be willing to do that, but I'd also would be willing to listen to any of the other ideas that commissioners may have before that.
All right.
So my question would be really more of a question around the planning of this. Was this put in to the code more for aesthetics, safety, or what was the main emphasis on putting it at a 6-inch versus a 3? Is it, which one is more important, safety or aesthetics?
It is both. The intention behind the code that's on the books is that lighting fixtures should be not within paved areas, so they should be off the edge of pavement, and they're generally protected off the edge of pavement by curbing. And then the inclusion of landscape islands within paved surface areas, and then lighting fixtures would be placed within landscape islands. So in essence, you would run out of pavement or hit a curb before you would hit a pole or a fixture of some type. And then there is the aesthetic component of it. So landscape islands are desired within parking areas for a few reasons. One, break up the heat island effect, to have landscaping and green space within the site, not just around the edge. And the other is to provide for defined traffic circulation within a site, to make sure that it's clear as to kind of how and where parking occurs and drive aisles are, et cetera. And so we don't get odds and ends parking. Just relying on pavement marking is great if you live in a warm climate. You get a half inch of snow and nobody knows where any of that is anymore. Right? So it is both, Mr. Foster. I can't say one necessarily trumps the other, but what came out of input from years back with the previous code didn't have any commentary on this. We were just getting a lot of, I think it was determined, just unsightly situations where parking lot lights were very tall, 25, 30, 35 feet. That was a concern. They were just on a concrete base in the middle of, I'll pick on Century across the street since it's been closed for a long time, right? It's that situation, a 3-foot concrete base with a 30-foot tall light fixture. Yes, that argument can be we need the base to protect the sun, the pole, but if you design the site properly, the need to have a 3-foot base to protect it, you'd really have to go pretty well to get over a curb and then eventually hit the light fixture itself. So it has been the requirement for the last 6, 7, 8 years. They've had the code in place.
What was the issue on the Topol site where we made them remove the bases? Was it that they couldn't put in the landscaping?
That was
the
one-
visibility of the road?
That was the biggest issue. So they poured 6 or so fixtures. We require on any plan set that you show the detail for lighting. That means the base, which is the footing detail, the base, how much is above grade, the pole, and then the light fixture, right? With clearly indicating how tall each of those elements are for the contractor, right? So they were poured not in compliance with the plan. And so that was noted. There were 2 fixtures that were immediately adjacent to the newly reconstructed 89 and the historic fixtures that were, or decorative light fixtures that were put out there as part of the city/state project where they have no more than a 6-inch base. The city did not require them to replace any of the bases around the site or at the rear of the site or the side of the site because they were effectively far enough away from the public right-of-way, from the roadway, and the issue is on the two in front, they immediately slope into some stormwater management features there. So the discussion and decision that was made was those 2 would be replaced and the others would remain, and they're all 3 foot high. So as a compromise, I would say, from the city.
Right, so taking in a compromise, if the petitioner did either or, landscaping or cutting down the bases, would that be in line with the same type of decision we tried to do for topals and in line with our code?
Yeah, this is always a challenge that we seem to run into is what's the remedy? The hard line is tear it out and replace them all, right?
Well, Well, and when you say replace them all, would you make them do that across the whole site regardless of what they had just put in place? I would only think this would apply to the new
Yes.
poles.
That is correct. It would only apply to the newest poles. In keeping with the decision that was made on the topo, it was, the two were very prominent, couldn't be screened, really started to detract from, put a lot of time and energy into having a site and a building that's designed really well, complements the considerable improvements that the state and the city made in 89, along 89, and said, we're not going to, as a compromise, require any changes for the rest of the site. Similarly here, we aren't looking at the bases of anything else that's on the site. Many of them, it's very strange. On the north edge of the site, many of them are less than a foot high. The ones on the south end of the site are all 3-foot bases. Anything that was put in the middle of parking lots, again, this is from decades ago, I have 3-foot bases. So had this been sorted out kind of on paper, we would have said, you need to have a base that complies for the new ones. So that's what, as you said, those are the ones we were talking about, Ms. Bishop, are the 4. They are generally about 25 feet to 40 feet, and I think the one most interior is probably 50 or 60 feet away from the public right-of-way. So this is a challenging situation with compliance after the fact, right? What's fair? What isn't going to have a spillover effect on future projects and developments? We certainly don't want to be in a situation where businesses just build whatever they want and come in and ask for permission later. That's not a good precedent. If the code isn't working, then the code should be addressed, right? But both of these situations wasn't where the code didn't necessarily work. It's just there was some eagerness during construction to get some things done, and they didn't necessarily either come and talk to us on the front end, or a contractor, in the case of the one on the south end, poured them all at 3 foot.
I have one last question on these points to your motion. Have we confirmed that the maximum fixture height is only 20 feet since this was written?
So this is a requirement of the code for fixtures in commercial entities, 20 feet. We don't have an understanding of what those are, what's on site. Those are existing poles that were installed decades ago. And so the poles that are being reused on the site were elsewhere on the site, right? They aren't new poles. So again, we get into this gray area of, do you mandate that the 4 that were, because 2 are repoured and 2 are reused, all comply, and then the others aren't? We also require 90-degree downcast fixtures. Again, that's a dark sky issue, to make sure that we're illuminating what's below, not what's outward or above, right? So new lamps were installed at some point. Some are 90-degree downcast and some are installed at an angle. Do you make them go around and change every one of them? Or do you focus on the ones that were put in? Again, this gets into a gray area on compliance. So the city's always tried to have latitude when it came to complying with codes, especially when you are when you have older commercial sites or old development sites. So I don't think anyone would argue that the site is much improved. Looks so much better out there. They've done a great job. And these are things we would have hammered out as a part of the original approval, but the original approval didn't indicate that they were doing anything with lighting. They were just adding on to the building, repaving surfaces, and doing landscaping, and then wall pack lighting on the building, which did all comply. So it is a challenge to kind of strike the balance between the hard line, this is what, letter of law versus intent of code.
Can I say one other thing about that? Who those poles are that we're talking about, none of it is in public driving area. It's all just where we're parking.
I'm sorry, can you turn your microphone on?
Sir, we have to have you go to the microphone so it can also be heard on.
I'm sorry. This is also, where those poles are located, it's just not in public parking areas. We're not gonna have public driving through those areas. It's just where we're parking vehicles, mostly just overflow vehicles that we're at. So that where the three are off the lot itself. That red one's not actually in a public driving area. That's where cars are backed up to, will be backed up to it and blocked from any customer. So it's, as a safety issue, it's really not, unless we damage one of our own vehicles, which I'd rather hit the concrete than the pole anyhow and knock it over and cause more problems. So where they are, and like I said, we'll probably be speaking with Drake and Dustin, probably building something around that one to protect that. And we actually have two others in the parking lot from previous that we'll end up building something around also. Probably next spring at this time too. So, but that's not in a, if we're safety wise, it's not in a public driving area.
All right.
Did you make a motion?
I have that Mr. Coons did make a motion.
Well, what is it?
To pass the motion that has been prepared with an amendment to remove.
Can you turn your microphone on, please?
I apologize, Misty. I have that Mr. Coots did make an initial motion. There is no second to my knowledge. His motion included an amendment to remove 3A1I and II.
That was it, yes. Would anyone like to make a second to this motion?
So we're or your motion is to remove I and double I,
Yes.
and the rest remain the same?
Yes.
Yes.
I'll second.
Okay. It's been moved by Mr. Coots and seconded by Dr. Mason to amend the prepared motion 2211-2 by striking 3A1I and 3A1II from this motion. Any further discussion?
I think I'm okay with that, and I would vote for it. That leaves the third option, which is just to include the installation of landscape islands. And maybe we can get to it after the vote on this motion, but would we also want to let the petitioner have the option to reinstall the bases at the right height and add that later on? That's my question, if we only leave them the option to install landscaping.
I may be wrong, but if they were to take them out and reinstall them at the compliant height, I don't believe we would need plan commission approval to do that.
Yep.
Since it's zone approval, it would be an administrative BSO review.
Mm-hmm.
And so I don't believe it needs to be included in the motion, as they are always allowed to comply with the strict letter of the zoning code.
Okay, no, that makes sense. Thank you, Mr. Daly.
All right. All right. We have the motion by Mr. Coots and the second by Dr. Mason to amend this motion by striking 3A1I and 3A1II. Any further discussion? In that case, we'll proceed with roll call vote on this amendment.
Dr. Mason,
Aye.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Foster.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
Aye. We now have the amended motion 2211-2, and this is for Lakeland CB Real Estate LLC, doing business as Badger Chevrolet Buick, 321 East Tyranena Park Road, parcels 2460713-1213001 and 2460713-1213002. This motion does set forth the city's zoning authority under Wisconsin state statutes, the city's code regarding conditional use requirements, the request to amend the conditional use that was first granted in October of 2021, the review by city staff and consultants, tonight's public hearing, and plan commission review. This motion does provide for a plan commission recommendation to the city council to grant the requested amendments subject to meeting applicable municipal code and statutory requirements and the requirements set forth in the planner's memo. This motion includes the following plan commission findings. The conditional use amendment will not be detrimental to or endanger the public health, safety, morals, comfort, or general welfare. B, the proposed amendment will not be injurious to the use and enjoyment of other property in the immediate vicinity or substantially diminish and impair property values. C, the proposed amendment will not impede normal and orderly development and improvement of surrounding property. D, adequate utilities, access roads, drainage, and other necessary facilities will be provided. E, ingress and egress will be designed so as to minimize traffic congestion. F, the proposed amendment shall conform to the applicable regulations of the district in which it is located. G, the proposed amendment at its proposed location is in harmony with the purposes, goals, objectives, policies, and standards of the City of Lake Mills Comprehensive Plan. And H, potential public benefits of the proposed amendment outweigh any and all potential adverse impacts. The motion to grant the requested amendment is further subject to, and this is as amended, A, revised plans reviewed by city staff to include code for compliance with the code prior to issuance of any building or occupancy permit. And this includes an exterior lighting and photometric plan that will include a revised plan and details to include installation of landscape islands surrounding light poles and fixtures. And 2, a revised landscape plan to include identification of all the amendments proposed for the southern parking lot landscape island, retention of the landscape island north of the expansion or an alternative location that meets code, details on the plantings to be installed. 3, a revised existing condition and site plan identifying all the amendments to the previously approved development plan and conditional use permit. Plan Commission recommendation is also subject to any additional requirements provided by the city's engineering and public works staff. So we have our prepared motion as amended of 2211-2. Is there any motion concerning this amended motion?
I'll make a motion to adopt motion 2211-2.
Mr. Coots will second.
All right, it's been moved by Mr. Foster and seconded by Mr. Coots to adopt the amended motion 2211-2. Any further discussion? In that case, we proceed with roll call vote.
Mr. Coots,
Aye.
Ms. Lazaris,
Aye.
Mr. Grady,
Aye.
Mrs. Bishop,
Aye.
Mr. Foster,
Aye.
Dr. Mason.
Aye.
Motion passes 6-0.
All right. Thank you. And now we proceed with our discussion on the comprehensive plan update. And we turn it over to present Mr. Wolf and Mr. Carranza to present your update and what we are going to be looking at this evening.
Thank you, Mrs. Aris. Tonight, our focus is on the next large chapter that we need feedback from you on, and that's housing. With the fact that we are not having a meeting in December. We really want to be able to get you kind of a really robust draft chapter to review kind of through the holidays and to discuss when we reconvene in January. Part and parcel with that will be the revisions from the last couple of chapters that we just worked through with finalizing land use and utilities and community facilities and transportation, getting all those edits back to you. So the goal is to get all of those things to you in mid-December, including housing. So you have plenty of time with them to review them, and the public has plenty of time to review them. So as you can see from the schedule, I think we did ourselves a service by meeting a couple weeks ago, helped us get through a lot of things. But yet there's some robust chapters to happen, which is housing, and then the agricultural, cultural, and natural resources. And we do anticipate having a draft chapter of that put together. And we are finalizing some things right now related. You have a lot of historic resources. We want to make sure they're well documented here. And then meeting with the Historical Society about some of those issues to make sure that they've had a chance to kind of look at it and review it, and then, of course, bring you draft chapters as well. We just feel it's important to have their input on that early before it comes to you to make sure that we've dotted I's and crossed T's associated with that. So kind of any questions, kind of schedule and where things are going, are there concerns with that? There'll be a fair amount of reading, but you'll have also a fair amount of time to do it. So, but tonight is, public involvement, always want people to weigh in. We still have the comment form always available. But tonight is focusing on housing and neighborhood development. The issue we have, and we asked you to kind of review what's on the existing plan. And I'm going to walk through some pieces of that, but we need to reconcile some things. The public respondents for the survey kind of told us how they feel about different housing types and their use and application and densities and such. And some of those don't necessarily align with maybe some bigger goals we may have in the community. That's a challenge. And so we'll talk about those. We need to know where we stand on workforce housing and the initiatives, et cetera, associated with it. So we need feedback from you on that, because it's going to help weigh in on, I'll say, some policy and decision-making for the council, ultimately. So when we work through the housing kind of questions with the survey, you can see that people overall are pretty satisfied with housing within the community, right? That's a really broad brush, though, right? When we start talking affordability, we start to dip a little bit more. And affordability means different things to different people. And one of the primary goals of the last plan, and which is a common goal for communities, is providing a variety of housing types for a variety of people at different stages and kind of economic conditions in their life, right? So it is something that we have to rectify with what people are telling us about infill opportunities and the type of housing that's may or may not be appropriate, they feel, in their neighborhoods or in their area. So, but the affordability issue certainly doesn't go away. Housing that's missing, there isn't a lot of inventory on single-family housing. I think we've made, through the land use chapter, made sure that there's ample land area where it can occur. The detached single-family rental is something people, respondents said they'd like to see, which isn't a big product we have here. So the housing that's missing, all the housing is too large, too expensive for my needs. We need affordable none of the above, good mix. I mean, these are important statements being made by people because it tells you there's no silver bullet to this issue, that everybody has a different perspective. It is challenging to try to address everybody's needs. Somebody may not feel that their specific concern has been particularly addressed, right? Downtown housing is needed, Century Site redevelopment is needed. Some say the type of housing is fine already in the community. Some are saying ranch condos, so that goes to like a single-family detached product. And then smaller starter homes, which goes back to that first comment of housing is too large, too expensive, and it's not, and again, the need for affordable. So,
If I could just add also, we've had comments in the past about senior housing and 55 plus. That's definitely something that came out of the sort of the other category responses in this particular question.
So we did try to ask people about specific housing comfortable with in their kind of neighborhood. And small pocket neighborhoods were well ranked, but as you can see, infill houses really weren't. And so how do we handle areas where we have infill opportunities, right?
If you go to the next one,
Yeah.
they're all presented.
Oh, thank you.
Images there.
Thank you, by percentages, right? So smaller houses close together is good, according to respondents. The pocket neighborhoods and modular houses, I mean, all kind of were ranked really well. Infill, where we have some narrow lots, et cetera, could be a challenge, right? We are trying to think of ways to make housing more affordable. We were not trying to force density issues onto people, but we did need feedback as we get into some of these about density in the sense of, do well-designed housing products, if they're more dense, are those okay? Because we do have infill opportunities within the community. And how do we address some of the issues on, lakeshore houses when something gets torn down and rebuilt? Two families is a great way to make things affordable. And two family can be a rental, but it could also be townhouse. Could be owner occupied on each side, could be zero lot line, right? Again, it's a lower price of admission to home ownership. So I think it is something that has to be explored, and your feedback on that is going to be really important on how you think we should address that in the document itself. So this is telling us it needs to look like single family homes, needs to be highly attentive to the character. You can see things that they don't like, side-by-side entries hidden. And I can tell you that's a recent construction in a community not near here, but that community decided they needed to put in restrictions on two-family homes because they were getting products that weren't inviting to them. So, so the community's telling us that's not really a desired product here. That they want inviting, they want good materials and such. Does any of that kind of surprise you? Is there any concerns about this about a two-family product?
Well, I think from my perspective, I too don't care for the side-by-side because then you just have this huge amount of pavement because anytime you start out with this thought that, well, there'll be some landscaping between, the landscaping goes away very quickly and the whole thing becomes a pavement. And I think from my viewpoint, it's unsightly and not contributing to good residential character in the community.
Others thoughts on that? If we talk about two-family housing and the importance of it in the housing chapter, is that acceptable? Would you because we do have sections in the housing chapter about affordability. We do talk about character in there. The existing document really focused on multifamily character because there were no controls going into that last plan document, which is why what's in the zoning code resulted from that. And I would say when we start talking about our new multifamily products, I think the bar has been elevated quite considerably on the newer products that have come in versus things that were constructed, 30 odd years ago. And again, here, we don't have townhouse, like row house housing, but they're, so that's multiple side by sides. But again, it is an opportunity for lower price of admission to the community, to home ownership. They certainly can be rentals, but you'll see a lot of townhouses are owner-occupied units. This doesn't mean that these are going to be everywhere in the community, but we did talk about our growth areas being planned neighborhoods. Is there opposition to these? I'll flip over here to these products. As you can see on the lower right, traditional with a variety of kind of building facades materials was, I'll say, well reviewed. But then if you look at the lower, the people that said none of these, pretty high as well, right? So that's a challenge for us, right? It's hardly a mandate.
Just to sort of elaborate on that same discussion or kind of add to it, I think the conversation is there is certainly a desire for affordability, and there are a number of ways to accomplish that, whether it be smaller footprint for the lots, smaller footprint for the house, or providing multiple dwelling units within a single structure as being presented here. And, ultimately, the community is telling us that they don't necessarily want it in all cases in their neighborhood, but they do want to have the products that are available to them on a higher design and quality in terms of standards and the aesthetics. And so that sort of puts a balancing act on the developer to determine, how do I create an affordable product and still meet these expectations of the community, and where does ultimately you guys, your perspective, how do you stand on the balancing act?
Can I get a history lesson?
I can try.
The neighborhood over by Fish Hatchery on South Main, in between South Main and the Fish Hatchery, by the high school. There's a lot of mix in that neighborhood, and I really like that neighborhood a lot. And I'm wondering how that came to be, and it seems like there's affordable options in there. I'm not sure if that's true or not. If a little history lesson there.
A lot of that was just kind of market driven. And then you have kind of the edge of the golf course area, kind of where it wraps around in the back. And they had, they wanted to have some multifamily product, like 2-family products in there. But the city, I would say, didn't do anything special to make those things happen. It just kind of enabled it through zoning that those products were opportunities. We didn't have any design criteria really to speak of at the time. I think you had developers that made some good products out there. But I would say just through good fortune, it happened in that way. Proximity to the school really obviously helps. People want to be near the schools. But the city didn't, I'd say, plan specifically to make any of that happen.
Did the same builder build the single-family homes and the multiple residences, or were those different builders building those different types?
I don't know. Were they different builders? Thank you, Dan.
I tell you that one of the products I have seen very recently, which would, I guess, put affordable home ownership into the realm of being for certain people, is those almost zero lot lines, but you build them to where each house had a front porch on it, and it brings
I hear
back
the Golden Girls, I'm sorry.
Yeah, I know. And it brings back that,
Medicine, sorry.
it brings back the older days of when you're sitting on your front porch and you can just talk to your neighbors because you're right there.
Mhm.
And that's something that really speaks to me, is something like that. And I don't know what anybody else thinks about it, but yeah, zero lot lines and smaller houses that all have front porches right next to each other, sense of community.
I think that's a great observation, and our code enables zero lot line. I think one of the challenges we had in our code was maybe the building footprint. We allow narrow single-family lots, and then we allow zero lot line. The older areas of the community have a 50-foot wide lot that can be 5,000 square feet. I think one of the challenges we have is the expectation of the general public on minimum size of a house, right? That they have to be, 1,500, 1,600, 1,800 square feet, rather than enabling someone to have 12, 13, or 1,400 square feet. The post-war houses were generally in that 12 to 1,400 square foot range, right? And, families of 4 and 5 grew up in them. I realize the 1940s and 1950s is a little different than today, but we have smaller family sizes, and if we're trying to get people into home ownership earlier, it certainly is a reasonable alternative. Are you opposed to smaller home sizes? I'm not going and saying tiny houses, but that's a conversation to be had. But would minimum home sizes around 1,200 square feet?
I'm not
Yeah,
opposed
I mean,
whatsoever to
there's-
smaller homes, because I believe that there would be a market for smaller homes. I wouldn't say, well, no, let's just have this enormous small home development. No, but there could be infill lots that would be ideal for doing products such as that, that there would be a need for certain small homes by some people who would desire that at some point in their lives. And because it would help them, it wouldn't be as expensive, it would be a home they could have, it would be not that much maintenance, or for an older person, now they're empty nesters, and it's very appealing. It could be very appealing that way.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I mean, that's really what both my kids did, was look for something on that lower, smaller footprint size.
Yeah.
So my son's house is barely 900 foot, but he's got his own house. So people look for that stuff.
And that has been a concern of, I'll say, the previous council about the affordability issue, and we're going to touch on more on that a little bit, is not making just apartments affordable to get people into the community, but getting people into home ownership, right? Because that's a huge difference maker long-term for people, is the ability to have ownership versus continually having to rent, because they may not be able to afford the larger down payments of housing, right? They can afford the mortgage. What gets them is having the dollars on hand for, a 10, 15, 20% down payment on a larger, very expensive house, because there's no other product.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't know, and I apologize if my question I'm just curious, is as far as do builders build that size of house now? Because it seems like, I'm just curious if there's money in it for them to actually build those kinds of homes.
Obviously,
what do we need to do in order for it to happen, I guess?
So when we sat down with the builders and real estate agents as part of the focus groups, we talked, about their kind of bread and butter product, and then we asked them about other things. The issue that gets to them is the cost of infrastructure per lot, and we touched on that on the land use discussion. I'm not going to say it's in everybody's portfolio. Every developer you have here, you may have to go out and find some people to do that. But I would say most communities have kind of regulated out smaller houses. That, well, your minimum is 1,600 square feet, or, you know, your minimum single-story house is 1,600 square feet. Your multi-story, you know, two-story is 1,800 square feet with a 1,200 square foot first floor, and et cetera. So we may not have opened the door to some of these things happening. I think it's a first step, is making sure that you've enabled it. Finding a developer, you're right, that could prove to be challenges, but there are places, you know, you're seeing it in Madison, you're seeing it in Milwaukee, that they do build. There are builders that build that product. You know, slab on grades, or you know, crawl space rather than full basement is certainly a way to save dollars on a house. So,
Justin, what's this? It says builders want to work with city to lessen their risk, whether upfront investment or lower cost to build.
okay,
Can you tell me what that
so we were talking about that a little bit, but we can talk about it now. It's that cost of infrastructure. That's what we get to. It used to be you would have developers that would develop subdivisions and then they would just sell lots to whoever wanted to buy one. Now the cost of infrastructure is such that it's $65,000 to $75,000 a lot just to put the infrastructure in. And in our market now, there certainly are lots that sell for more, but generally, you know, your 10,000 square foot lot is selling somewhere around $60,000 to $70,000, and so they aren't really making any money on the lot. They also don't want to bite off more than they can chew. They're not going to go out and plat a number of lots, because they got to pony up for all that infrastructure, and the absorption may not be as fast as they want it to be, right? They're not going to sell as many as quickly as they'd like. The builders, their profit really comes off of building the home. So that's their key, is getting people in that want to buy houses. But they aren't going to go out and plat 40 lots at a time, because there's just too much risk with them. And there are ways to minimize that risk. The city has done that. I'm kind of looking at Dan on it with some of the Brookstone additions. The city has spearheaded completing some of those additions that weren't completed years ago, and they've sold well. The city was able, because of the Tyranena Point development on the south side, that is part of TID 5, and the city was able to leverage that new development to help offset the cost of reconstructing Mud Lake Road and some of the stormwater management improvements there. There are many communities that do utilize TIF to help just defray the cost of infrastructure, and then through development agreements, the developer has to build a certain number of lots or a certain amount of value within time. Again, it attracts families, it puts kids in the schools, right? And the schools generally make them, looking at Dr. Mason on this, they make, you know, it's really about having kids in to get their state aids, number of children. There are communities that actually just do borrowing for developers, and they enter in agreements. They use your borrowing capacity and the rates that a municipality gets, and commits that to a developer for their project, and the developer pays them back as they sell lots. So there are a number of ways that you can help minimize the risk for development, because they don't have to go to a bank, right? They're just working with the municipality. And that can jumpstart certain development types here. Thoughts on those types of things? I know those are council decisions ultimately, but yeah, but they are, I'll say, alternative funding mechanisms to explore. Should we be talking about those in the plan?
I think certainly.
And I don't want to put Ms. Bishop on the spot, but I want to put Ms. Bishop on the spot because she's the council representative. Those are things that the council is going to have to grapple with, but if it's in the plan as a discussion item, to say explore these things, evaluate whether these are viable and should be done, is that?
Yeah, I think it's okay to say there are a variety of funding sources municipalities can undertake. What I was thinking about when you started talking to me was, Wisconsin seems to be interesting in that we have TID districts, and I haven't necessarily seen that in other states. Like I see like maybe there's a sewer TID across the whole municipality, and I don't know if that's something that we can do, and those are other discussions that council's gonna have to have as well. But yeah, to say like, you know, you should seek out funding for this at the municipal level, I think that's okay.
In the economic development chapter, we will talk more extensively about TID. We do have limits on TID, so we do have to be judicious. You do have a number of TIDs that you can, that are in place. You can, by state law, have a certain percentage of newly platted residential within them. So again, there's a way to help springboard that. I think there's things that can be done. Ultimately, those are council decisions on what happens there. They always accompany development agreements. But some of these things about exploring using the city's funding capabilities, you know, borrowing capabilities to enter into agreements with developers is new, right? So, but if you're comfortable putting that with some of that discussion being in the comp plan, we will add it.
Right, and I don't think it's new per se. I think it's just a new discussion for this topic.
I'm sorry,
Yeah.
thank you, yes. That's how a number of communities kind of got out of 08-09, was by making their debt capacity available to developers to say, to keep the ball rolling at a time when banks weren't loaning money to people. Just a little bit more on the housing products. Again, we have these conversion of houses into apartments that happened here years ago, and then the pendulum swung back. Some of those larger houses on South Main and Newbury. I always say Newbury. Mulberry.
He means Mulberry, yes.
Grew up on the east side of Milwaukee, so we kind of get that in your head. So that's always a challenging one, but because again, the houses are large, there's pros and cons to that. Again, there's still the none of these, so I think there's some concerns about density issues and infill opportunities that do need to be managed.
Dustin, I find infill to be really interesting because looking around the city in various neighborhoods, there are not very many empty lots available at all. There was one on Pine that was just bought and filled in with a house. But if you're looking downtown, there's not really anything. If you're looking in our historical neighborhoods, there's not much. So it's going to be hard here.
Yeah, I think in some of the older areas of the community, there may be a tear down here and there, and so what should replace it? You know, we do have some. If you go down South Main, you know, there's some apartments there that were built obviously in like the late 70s, early 80s, and they kind of stick out a little bit. It doesn't mean that that type of housing product is bad, but I would say that the kind of character in relation to what's around it probably didn't achieve what people would probably expect. The development just along the trail to the south of Topol, I think is a really good infill project. I think that turned out really well. I think you're in a handful of those, especially when some things start happening along Sandy Beach Road. There are a handful of sites that could redevelop in that area. And I think that's where you might see some of the small multifamily desired.
And then also there's sort of the conversion of some of these larger, homes that are in these existing neighborhoods into multi-unit structures, for example, flat. And that might be an opportunity, but that is always also part of that same conversation of where is that permitted and is it desired by certain neighborhoods versus others? I think part of this discussion is also one of those key recommendations from the previous plan as far as providing access to these community services and bike trails and pedestrian facilities, et cetera. When we talk about new neighborhoods and new development and planned neighborhood ultimately the question is, are those services provided equitably to those new neighborhoods? And there's obviously a lot of cost involved in providing that from the city. So when there's infill development, whether it be a tear down or a conversion, I think there's an opportunity there ultimately to, meet it within the context of the existing neighborhood, make it look like a single family residence to the extent as possible, as discussed in the survey, but provide some of that density and access to the existing facilities that are out there.
The next few slides just kind of focus on the larger multifamily, and you can see that neighborhood scale is pretty important to people. I think that there has been some concerns in the community for a long time about multifamily development. I also like to think that we've turned some corners on that with your recent projects. But we do have, the Century site downtown, which, what's appropriate there, right? It's a nice opportunity to get some new downtown residential. Getting commercial in hand with that is challenging. You have a robust historic downtown. Adding new build commercial prices itself out immediately. It's very expensive, right, from a leasing perspective, when there's other options available around downtown. So certainly respect that it's desired to have mixed use there. Developers coming in have said it just doesn't pencil out for commercial unless they have one large user who's going to take the whole space, which is not usually common. What do we feel about the Century site? What do we think is appropriate there? We have TID 8 for the downtown. It was put into place for a couple of things, notably to make sure that the Century site, when someone came knocking, that it was an option available should the council choose to use it, and to leverage redevelopment of potentially that site to make other improvements in the downtown. But where does the Plan Commission kind of fall as to what's desired or appropriate for there? Is multi-story residential supported by this group?
Well, I still like these initial concept drawings that you prepared at the time that showed mixed commercial with the residential above the commercial, and but lacking that. If that isn't something that can be accomplished, ideally I would like that, but if not, then of course, one could look at residential on that site. Mixed use, I think, which would ideally include a grocery store, but not the only user of the commercial space, because there could be convenience retail as well.
Mm-hmm.
So I still like the idea of a mixed use there, maybe 3 stories.
Okay. Others?
What have you noticed that's been holding it up?
Getting it to pencil out. You need a certain kind of critical mass on number of units. If a user came in and they knew they had a large commercial entity to take the first floor, that certainly makes it easier. The issue then becomes how many floors of residential do they need to make it go? You're probably talking 3/4. You'd probably be looking at a 4-story building out there to really make it pencil out for somebody. It's just very expensive to build right now. The trades laborers is expensive. Building materials, as we know, are expensive. So that's been the issue right now. It's not going to redevelop tomorrow, but providing a certain level of direction or desire in the plan is very helpful.
So one thing I've seen that I don't know if it would go over well in this community, but how many people have been to the Milwaukee Public Market? I could see that being used for something like that if we had the right businesses that we could draw here, being off the interstate, and then who knows what you could make it into. I mean, they could build the market below and have some housing above it, or they could use the building as it is and build it into like a public market for incubator for starting businesses.
Mequon done that, so we could certainly draw on that a little bit.
Yeah, I understand that a lot of this feels a little nebulous when you're talking about, ideas and concepts and things that you'd like to see, but I think something to keep in mind is kind of, the end goal is, what's the vision that we're kind of looking at for what types of housing, how we want to deal with some of these infill opportunities. And then just remember that when developers are looking for sites to develop, oftentimes they're looking for, a path of least resistance. And so if they identify something that the community has put into a plan that they have already vetted to at a conceptual level, a basic idea level, that will give them, a higher level of confidence to move forward and propose something that they believe is matching the policymaker's vision for an area or for, for example, for a downtown development or for a subdivision or, in different areas of the community. And obviously, as someone who's newer to the community and has been looking for both options to purchase housing, and then after struggling in that realm, looking for places to rent, there is certainly a lack of all types of housing, I think, in Lake Mills right now. Whereas if you're in a single family home market right now, you're looking at, if you're lucky, maybe one home coming on the market a week. Sometimes not even that. And then even when, looking for rental opportunities, you're still kind of looking at, 1-2 units coming available a month. And so just kind of keeping that in mind, that this is clearly a desirable place to live, that people want to live here, and the opportunities that do exist get taken up very quickly. And so identifying, housing in these plans as a priority going forward, and how to meet the needs of the community for the different types of housing that are desired by people in all different phases of their lives, is probably one of the more important pieces of this comprehensive plan that could assist in driving development, that developers who are looking for, what does this community want? What could I propose to do that will have that they will react to well? So I guess as you're thinking about what your vision as a body, individually as a body, what you would recommend, to the city council for inclusion, is those are kind of the issues that you're grappling with, and how to move in a direction that grows the future of the community in the way that with concepts, ideas, and character that you're looking to incorporate.
So especially with concepts, ideas, and characters, I like the concept drawing that we had, back with TID 8 too, and it makes sense. And, to have a housing product that has 3 or 4 stories of residential, it's a chance to introduce a new kind of product and potentially hit some sort of a different price point. A lot of the feedback with that, though, I think a lot of people in the community saw the picture and they saw a very modern looking building, and that scared a lot of people off. If there would be a way to do that type of a building, but make it look like it blends more into downtown, even to the point of when you present the concept art for it, present the concept art of the new building next to the existing, so people can see how it fit in. I think that would make it make something like that much more palatable.
Yeah, we can absolutely do that. I think one of the challenges with the TID 8 stuff was more scale, massing, kind of spatial relationship than it was final character, right? And I think we've heard overwhelmingly, not just from you, but from the public, that the character of the development is a priority. Making sure that it's contextual, make sure that it reflects the historic integrity of in the downtown. A little different if you're on one of the edges, right? But when it's downtown, it really needs to be mindful of what makes Lake Mills, right? So,
And at the same point, it's been vacant for 3 years, so whatever goes in there is gonna be.
yeah. I do want to just kind of remind you to go back through the housing chapter and talk about and to revisit some of these elements that we're going to be adding on to. So one of the key programs here just talks about promoting traditional lots in neighborhoods. I think that's important, but we have growth issues, as Drake was saying. There's not a lot of inventory out there, so we do need to encourage new subdivision development in the community. So continue supporting affordable housing. When we talk about housing affordability issues and workforce housing, that doesn't mean we're forsaking all other housing and only focusing here. And I do want to reiterate that point, right? We just want to make sure that there are housing choice for people at different points in their lives, right? And a goal to try to help people get into home ownership. One of the things that came out of the last council meeting, last council meeting, was, I'm sorry, I'm just trying to pull up a document. So there was a council presentation that was done a while back on housing, affordability issues, and then the site that's south of the Light and Water Building, that's owned by the city, to evaluate, as you can see here, this big red blob is the property that's owned by the city south of the Light and Water Building, and to develop it for affordable housing. They were going to be, Mr. Foster remembers. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to.
I do.
I'm wondering what we should include about that, if anything, in this document, because again, that was kind of prior to the last council. One of the things that happened, I'm going to just kind of flip ahead here to this was the development plan that was put together. So this is land owned by the city. It has some constraints associated with it, but it does have utilities adjacent to it. Adding future phases becomes a little challenging because of topography, but they certainly can be overcome. When TID 2 closed, TID 2 was the industrial park TID. We kept it open a year, as we were allowed to by law, to collect those dollars and sequester them for housing issues. They haven't been spent to date to my knowledge, but the goal of doing that at that time was to inject it into helping offset infrastructure costs there, and making lots available to people to be built on for workforce housing. And there's some criteria you have to meet based on the federal HUD standard for that. I still feel this is very viable. It is not included in any long-range plans, et cetera, to date, because it was more of an affordability initiative that was kind of taken under the wing by the previous council. I'm looking at Mr. Foster for the head nodding. Thoughts on this?
I still like it. It sort of builds them up similar to some of the areas like you live in over there, Greg, where you have the driveways in the back or the alleys in the back and things like that. And it was going to be really pretty much
that's great.
Almost zero cost for the homeowner for the lot. It was costing them for the building, or if we had a builder come in and build them, then we'd have a couple different sets of products in there. I don't think these had basements, they were
No,
on lot,
did
they were
not.
on.
Yeah, they were not gonna have basements. Some of them were alley, loaded.
Yep.
The first phase would be the ones that are really just immediately along Industrial Drive, because they're readily served by existing utilities.
Yeah.
As I said, there's some grading issues. The lots start to fall away as you go towards phases 2 and 3. The city is now kind of getting fill from some projects around the community to help offset that. It needs to be filled regardless if it stays industrial or went to some residential product. This could be either standalone, single-family homes. They could be zero lot line.
Yep.
And there were a couple of larger lots on the corners that were available for some townhouses.
Yeah.
So we had costs associated with it, but this was an initiative saying, how do we get people into homeownership at a lower price of entry? As Mr. Foster said, in essence, the lot would be given to the developer, to the builder, to build a house. The owners or the prospective owners would go through a normal mortgage process, right? But by being given land that automatically has equity, right, that it can overcome that could be their down payment, in essence, for getting a home, right? That they would automatically have the value of the home, of the lot, into their total lot home package price, that they wouldn't need to come with cash for a down payment. And then there are programs, the Watertown Foundation has also programs where they can assist on these things. So we'd met with them previously. So those are the things that were being explored. And so this was truly a public-private partnership. The city would be kind of the developer of the lots, if you will, but it would be in agreement with a developer, a builder to build lots, and then the requirements that they go to people meeting certain criteria.
From the council's perspective, we just approved a grant application to look at affordable housing and how to fund it. And I think, again, leaving any conversation in the comprehensive plan more general about the city should look at avenues to do this, as opposed to mentioning a very specific project in the city that the city should take on. I would prefer to leave it more general.
Okay, consensus of the group, we just need direction on this, so, because this was a big initiative, and I don't know if it ever, again, there may be a pivot for the current council on this. It's out there, and it's not really in any long-range plan, so.
No, well, I don't disagree with Catherine, but I do think that something like this could be put in there as an example of what we could look at for this type of housing, for zero lot lines, for affordable housing. It doesn't have to come right out and say this is what it would look like, or this is what we want in there, but this is an example of what something could look like. Would you agree with that?
Well, then I think I would leave out the location. I would just show more general plans to say, here's an affordable housing type, no basement, smaller lots. The alley, what do you call it?
Alley loaded.
The alley loaded access, which is something we've discussed before, I think in relation to other portions of the housing. So I would just, again, I would tend to keep it more general than saying like, here's the development plan for this specific lot in the city that the city owns, because we're not anywhere close to there yet, at least at our council right now.
Okay. And I just want to touch on the alley loaded, because I know that's like added infrastructure, but if you have a traditional lot, you need it to be wider, and so you get less lots on the frontage, right? So that's why we're exploring alley loaded with like a 15-foot wide or 18-foot wide alley in the back. So narrower lots, right? They could still be an attached product, but they could all, by and large, they'd probably be a detached garage. But in case there was a question as to why we were looking at alleys. All right, we'll put some stuff together on that. We'll see where it comes out, and if it needs more detail or less detail, we'll let you decide on that. We're obviously not trying to paint the council into a corner or anything, but again, this was the affordability issue, and kind of this was an important initiative previously, so Couple other things. Of course, this doesn't go away, balancing affordability concerns, other planning issues. We'll update that. You can see that that's kind of been a concern with the community based on their responses to surveys and such. One of the things that was in here was anti-monotony standards, and this one talked about single family. We don't regulate single family housing in the community in that way. This does talk about Grafton, Wisconsin. Grafton, Wisconsin has an architectural review board, and they review not just every commercial entity, et cetera, or industrial entity. They review every home permit and exterior expansion. I'm not sure you want to go that far. Are we very concerned about anti-monotony in this sense? Like, how hard an edge do we want to take on this? And what should be in here, if anything, related to anti-monotony?
We just tell them we don't want anything like they have over in Watertown. Can't think of the name of that. It's down by Bethesda Lutheran, and every single house is gray brick, and they look exactly the same.
Oh, right.
So how can we say that in words that we...
So, general discussion about we're going to encourage these things, but I guess the city is not looking to get into the architectural review of single-family housing.
No.
No, we don't,
Okay.
no.
Okay, that's what I need to understand here, because that's what Grafton does, and
Yeah,
that's
no,
what was
no,
in
no.
there.
Yeah.
I wouldn't think so.
That's too far for us, yeah.
Yeah, 2 meetings a month they have on that, and
No.
if we're looking at everything from materials to the architectural styles, et cetera. Okay, so that will help here, that we want to encourage for single family. Do we want to be reviewing two-family? We review multifamily. Do you want to get in the reviewing of two-family?
No.
I'm just curious, what's the filter that we have that doesn't allow for that, right? I mean, is there anything that we do that would keep people from creating a bunch of gray houses?
No. We rely on if it's a new subdivision, the developer typically has their own.
Like if whatever the builder wants to do, he can do it, or he or she can do whatever he wants to do.
Yeah, that's generally it. You rely on the developer people generally don't want to move into a neighborhood where every house is exactly the same, because when you try to sell your house, or two people sell their house simultaneously, what differentiates yours from theirs? So there is disincentive for a developer to have them all be the same. I think talking in the general sense and encouraging anti-monotony, but we don't have anything on the codes. We do not review anything related to a single-family house at the city level. We let the homeowner and the builder decide what's going to happen in a development. I'm not saying we have a problem with it, but we have something in the document here from the previous one. I'm just wondering how much it needs to be there.
Well, I think you could encourage distinctiveness and for developments. You have a developer's agreement. Well,
Not on single-family residences.
for a plat, you don't have a developer's agreement?
Totally dependent. I mean, it would depend on
Microphone.
what the city is contributing. I don't know that we really need to engage in this conversation. We do not have standards in place that dictate what single-family houses look like in the city of Lake Mills.
Yeah.
Well, I suppose you don't, but if you're going to approve a subdivision, do you not, as part of
With regard to
this,
the plat, we don't see design that says
use a
this is.
developer's agreement? Does the city not use developer's agreements?
With regard to design criteria on single-family residences, with regard to city contribution through TIF, with regard to city infrastructure, with regard to a give and take between the developer and the city, sure, but the city does not have a history of dictating single-family development.
Yeah, the most recent development we had was Tyranena Point, and aside from the TID association with it, and there was an agreement because there's public infrastructure, but we don't get involved in what the design criteria for the individual lots is going to be. Prior to that would have been Brookstone, and again, the city leaves it to developer. So we have this section in the existing document, and that's why I'm asking, do we just want to talk in the general sense that we don't want to see, a lot of development looks exactly alike?
How effective is that for a developer?
I think it's feel-good language, unless you're really going to put your money where your mouth is and start reviewing these things. I have a client community that they have some people that are saying we should allow the metal box type housing, right, where someone's putting like what were like storage containers in
3D
essence,
houses
right?
and stuff like that.
What's that?
Like 3D houses coming on and things like
Yeah,
that.
and they take the those
Connex
shipping
boxes.
containers,
Yep, shipping
weld a few of them together.
Yeah, you couldn't do.
We haven't had that problem. I mean, I don't know if we have an issue that needs to be touched on. I think it's nice to say anti-monotony design standards. If you want to talk in the general sense, but I don't think the city's wanting to get into the business of regulating single-family homes in that way.
Instead, you could encourage distinctiveness.
Now, just to play the devil's advocate, though, don't we in downtown we have historical. Like whoever builds on Century, don't they have to
Absolutely.
fulfill some sort of
Yes.
historical
Yes.
context in that? What is that? Is there any kind of language that you could adapt for new?
We can always put language together. The question is it a solution in search of a
Or
problem?
is it going to discourage people from ever building, and then we're going to be back where we are? Right?
So you have to look at the zoning districts, right? R14 specifically is large lot, single-family residence. Everything downtown is in a B1, downtown business district. There are different standards with regard to development in that district than there are in R14, R28, R312. There's just a difference in treatment with regard to that. With regard to R312 specifically, those are seen as commercial structures, commercial development, and there are pretty robust standards with regard to what development looks like on that site, in that zoning designation. With regard to R14 development in the city of Lake Mills, we currently don't have code that dictates this is what design criteria look like for residential structures in these particularly zoned districts.
And we don't have defined historic districts. We have eligible districts, but we don't have any criteria related to that. So if there was a single-family home in an area, South Main Street, next to some of those beautiful houses, if someone decided to replace a home, there's nothing that compels them to build something that aligns Queen Anne, Victorian, whatever it might be, next to it. So somebody could build where we want. We absolutely have the regulations in place if somebody wanted to do multifamily, that we can make sure that it's contextual, right? So I guess I'm asking about this because it's in the document. Should it remain? Should it just be tweaked? Is it, again, this discussion about what Grafton is doing, right? I'm just looking for some direction.
Yeah, not an architectural review board. I mean, I think it's fine to talk about you want to encourage distinctiveness in neighborhoods, in developed neighborhoods.
Okay.
That, there's distinctiveness between, so that the houses aren't looking alike. So maybe you want to encourage something rather than say, well, it's anti-monotony. But, which is the same thing.
Drake, you mentioned earlier, you said if we had a vision for what we want Century to look like, you think that would attract more developers maybe? And I'm just curious if that philosophy holds to new developments and different single-family developments. If we say, this is the neighborhood we're looking for, this is what we want for this particular, does that attract more people or not necessarily?
I think it's probably most effective for an infill redevelopment because those are typically more expensive. Those are costlier for a developer to get involved with.
Yeah.
And so there's a higher level of risk for them to go through a process and not have it be successful or have it not go anywhere. I think you identify areas in the community, growth areas, you know, you have, you know, future land uses, things like that. What types of mixture of housing opportunities would you like in a certain area? As far as specific design standards for like a new residential development in a greenfield area, I would not say that's common. I hope that answers your question.
Thank you.
So we'll pare it back but it's not an area you're gonna have a lot of teeth because you're not recommending to do anything code-wise related to it. So just an FYI. So I wish Mr. Homan was here tonight. This out of the last plan, which has led to some zoning code regulation, is about impacts of garages on streetscapes, right? So the issue of not having garages generally immediately in front, especially detached garages immediately in front of buildings, et cetera. This is where some of this came from. I'm not sure if this needs to be in here in the same way, but I do want your feedback on how we should handle this. And maybe this is a conversation needs to wait till maybe Mr. Homan's back, but the goal wasn't to prevent people from being able to build on their lots or be overly onerous, but it was intended to make sure, Mr. Foster talked about people being able to sit on their front porches and see each other, et cetera, and talking about the two-family issue where it's just garage after garage surrounded by a strip of green. I mean, that was the intent. That's the intent behind it. It doesn't apply perfectly. When we have a 50-foot wide lake lot, that's a little bit of a challenge, right? We've had 2 properties in the last 7 years that have needed variances because of the existing condition of the lot, right? That there weren't any other options available to them.
I would say a variance is the appropriate vehicle for such instances. And for 2 and 7 years is a very good record.
Do we still need to like focus on this? Do we want this to stay?
I think it's appropriate to comment on it because, you know, the position of a garage can detract from the character of the whole neighborhood. If it's repeated constantly, then yes, it can.
Okay.
So it's worthwhile to discuss.
Okay, we'll revisit. This is by no means the last conversation on
This is.
We just are looking for some direction so when we start editing here.
Yeah.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, we cover most of this in another document. So this
Yes.
just needs to be an overview of what we want in the other document.
Yeah, this is why the other document resulted the way it did was what came out of this. So, enhancing multifamily design standards, we'll update this. We have very good multifamily design standards that work. They've resulted in very good products now. So we're just gonna update this to reflect that. If there's things you feel that the zoning code isn't effectively addressing or too restrictive on, we would love to hear that to see if there's things that need to be addressed in here. Again, the neighborhood design principles still hold true. This is about, as we talked the other day, about the planned neighborhoods. So we'll just update that a little bit based on conversation we had. But that's really what we had. We just need some feedback from you on these items. I know we're a little longer than our kind of 2 hours, but
The only thing, the first speaker, I don't know if that's something we need to take into consideration as far as talking to them.
Yeah, he brought up the stuff about the bike plan.
Mr. Temperley?
Yeah.
Oh, yes, Mr. Temperley, of course.
I guess I look at this as a document of direction that the council and the plan commission, are trying to achieve, and then they work with the various standing committees of the council, like Public Works Board, to make them happen. I mean, I think if the council says this is what we're doing, the Public Works Board is supposed to be on board with that.
Yeah, I was thinking along the same lines. It's just, what's the mechanism? Is it the council to bring the stuff from the comprehensive plan to the Public Works Board, or is there some other way that that information gets to them for them to review it? I don't know. I'm just asking. Is there, what's the best way, if we're gonna put something in here, that we could ensure that it was looked at least?
Right. If there's a section that the Plan Commission thinks would benefit from the review and expertise of another committee or commission within the city, then I think it would be within this commission's prerogative to send that section to the Public Works Board, for example, with a request for feedback on that section. So I think it would take, an intentional act by this commission to seek out that feedback, identify a chapter that you've kind of have been reviewing, whether that's a bike plan or something like that, and ask for additional feedback and incorporate that feedback as the commission, sees fit. But I think you certainly could do something like that.
I think part of the issue is, at the last meeting, we talked extensively about bike paths and transportation, and this is something that the Public Works Board has been working on, at least for the summer. And so they probably feel like their toes were stepped on. I see our role here, again, is a little bit more general than specific bike paths, even though I'm looking at the map now, map 4B, we have proposed off-street paths for bikes. But I don't see that specifically as something the Public Works Board can't take back and refine or make other recommendations to the council on necessarily. So that's how I saw our role. But if it's something we wanted to get feedback on, they're going to make their recommendations anyway, regardless of what our comprehensive plan says. And if they come up with something better, great. But
in a situation where the council has decided, or the community said, we want some sort of bike ped facilities on here, the council says, yes, we're going to have it designed that way, and now it's up to the Public Works Board to make sure that happens. I can't imagine it's a situation where the Public Works Board says, no, we don't want to do it, but the council is saying it's what the public says they want, right? The council is the ultimate arbiter. They're the decision maker, right?
It's all very confusing in this day and age.
I guess I don't take map 4B, our bicycle and pedestrian network, as like the ordinance that says these are the bike paths.
No, it's not. Yeah.
And it would be up for the Works Board to propose that ordinance or that actual path to the council in line with the plan to have bike paths.
So I guess we roll that back. Would it behoove them to go out and look at the other products, especially the comprehensive plan, to see what guidance they may want to take from it instead of us trying to force feed them?
Yeah, the bike and ped plan that you have on the books, is the one that's really the guiding document. And that is the one, that's the detail, right? This is a general, these are, I'll say, preferred routes or connections, primary connections, but ultimately, and the document talks about that bike and ped document needs to be updated or warmed over because it's been a number of years, but that's the document that governs.
Yeah.
Ultimately.
Is it true that nothing from that document has been done in the last 15 years, like was stated?
I wouldn't agree with that. I think you've done a number of things. And then you've had other entities who've sought to do more than was even thought of in that plan.
I think the South Main Street bike lane was added since then.
Yes,
so we at least have that, and that's pretty significant.
Yep.
Yeah. Okay.
But the larger issue is, we'll have to disseminate this somehow. And however you decide to do that to your divisions and the different people that work in the city or whatever, and committees and so on. Mm-hmm. So there should be some kind of plan down the road for dissemination, right?
I agree with that, that there are certain parts of the comprehensive plan, certain chapters that should go to other city boards and commissions for their comment.
for their review.
Yeah, review and comment, please, yeah.
I would certainly say that after you've kind of
Well, sure,
gotten the
that would be a
document the way
poll.
you'd like it, we can certainly send sections or whole documents to others. Yeah,
Yeah.
Drake's direction, et cetera.
Mhm.
That's what we had for you tonight.
All right.
If there's any odds and ends things, we're more than willing to hear them. If there's,
All right. And then we'll hear more about these matters in January, as I understand it.
yes, you're going to get, I'll say, a fair amount of reading material from us in December,
All
but you'll
right.
have ample time in advance of meeting in January. Talk about it.
Well, in that case,
Motion to adjourn.
all right, everyone, Mr. Grady has moved to adjourn,
Mr. Coots will second.
and Mr. Coots seconded to adjourn. This is our last meeting of 2022. Happy Thanksgiving, everyone. And I am thankful for each one of you and your dedication to making Lake Mills always better. And thank you so much. And so now it's been moved by Mr. Grady and seconded by Mr. Coots to adjourn. All those in favor, signify by saying aye.
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 Anyone who is opposed? All right, we're adjourned.